Hi darlings, this is Drawing Clothes on Bodies video number 3. If you haven't watched videos 1 and 2, I highly recommend it because I'm going to reference the information that I went over in those other 2 videos in this video a lot. What are we going to go over today? We're going to go over specific construction elements today. Darts, pleats, gathers, various drapes, how to address hemlines. My fingernails are still a little bit blue from the indigo workshop that I attended in late August. I'm just drawing on marker paper. I'm not going to marker today. This is just nice paper to demo on. What are darts? Darts are when you take your fabric and you pinch out excess fabric to create a closer fit to the body. And because now I'm talking typically, all right, there are all different kinds of bodies out there, but typically women have more in and out curves, smaller waists, larger breasts, than men do, where men are a little bit boxier in the torso. And so women's darts tend to radiate from the apex, that is the center of the breast, and darts tend to be bigger. Whenever you do a dart, you never want to start at the apex because you don't want to give her cone boobs. I mean, if you're going for a Madonna look, sure, but you don't want that look in everyday garments. And so when you are drafting your patterns, you're going to leave a space from the apex to the beginning of your dart. The most common darts are probably your waist dart. So we'll have this sitting in the center of 1/2, and that's a waist dart that ends at the waist. And if you continue it through, this is a fisheye dart. This is the same placement as a princess seam. If you were to do a princess seam, a shoulder princess would start at the shoulder, go through the apex, go down the center of 1/2, and go all the way down. An armhole princess starts at the armhole, curves towards the apex, goes through the apex, and then follows that same line all the way down. Another common dart is the bust dart, apex to side seam, about 1 inch or so below the armhole. And that creates a very common fit. Other darts include your French dart, which starts at the side seam and goes in diagonally. You could have a shoulder dart. Typically, you see those more often in the back, where, your shoulder kind of slopes forward. And so you want to pinch out that extra fabric to create that rounded shape. You can have a neck dart. And you can have a center bust dart. Center front usually goes all the way across, something like that. On men, you can have the exact same darts. You can just shape it less by pinching out less fabric. Typically in menswear, the most fitted tops are suit jackets. I mean, if you think about it, all kinds of button-ups and button-down shirts are, they're tapered, but they're still fairly boxy and get tucked in. Most of it can be shaped into the side seam. T-shirts have stretch, so they don't need darts. But tailored jackets are made out of crisp wools, and you want to get that really nice shape. And some jackets, they'll have a double fisheye dart. You'll see this kind of, and they're very shallow, and they fit along the body of a jacket like so. More typical will be your side panel. So whereas on women, your princess seam cuts in the center of one side, on menswear, you'll have a side panel that sits like this, and you won't have a side seam. You'll connect the side seam and just have like one piece that sits like this. Okay? And so when you're doing your patterns, it looks like this. There's the front of your jacket, there's your armhole, and there's your front. This sort of looking thing, your center panel, and then you have your back. So if you have your jacket in the back, and then you have your side panel back there, Oftentimes you'll see that kick pleat, that vent, along that seam. You'll have two. You'll have one on each side. Alternatively, not additionally, alternatively, you can have one in the center back. Don't do all three. I mean, you'll just have flappy flaps. Okay, so you could do these or this. Okay, don't do both. If you watch my design process series, then you know that this is one of my favorite books in my library when I'm at that stage where I'm exploring kind of sculptural things I can do with fabric. And this is a really terrific book for all kinds of stuff because it shows different things you can do with fabric: quilting, cording, pleating, tucking, all that stuff. It gives you awesome black and white photos of these things constructed out of muslin and instructions on how to do all these insane things. Let's start with gathers, okay? This is single edge gathering where you have gathers on the top, none on the bottom, okay? And the gathers are all in the seam allowance of your fabric. And when you have this piece of fabric, you're going to sew that so you don't see those gathers. You're going to sew it so that your waistband or your other part of your garment is going to sit like so. And so you're only going to see the gathers coming out. You're not going to see the actual gathered, scrunched up fabric. So let's say you have a simple gathered skirt, okay? And let's say you are making it out of a cotton that is as stiff as muslin, okay? First, we draw our wraparounds from video number 1. And so we have a waistband that wraps around high hip like so. And all these gathers are going to be tucked into that waistband. Okay. Next, we're going to draw the basic shape of the garment. We just said that we're going to use a cotton about as stiff as the muslin. And because it's gathered on the top, it's going to poof out some, right? So we're going to draw the basic shape. And remember, because of gravity and her hip coming up like this, it's going to poof out and then it's going to fall back. This is just going to fall from the waistband like so. Here's the number 1 rule of hems. Hems, the angle of hems follows the angle of the last fitted spot. So, for example, if you have a skirt and the waistband is here and it just poofs from that waistband, then the angle of the waistband is going to be the angle of the hem. If you have a coat and it's fitted at the shoulders, but it's straight, it's not fitted at the waist or the bust anywhere, here's the angle of the shoulders, the last fitted place. And here's your coat. The hem is going to follow the angle of the last fitted place. And so it's going to follow that angle, the angle of the shoulders. And so what you're going to end up with then the skirt in here is going to follow that angle. Now, this is the angle of her hips, so that's going to be the angle of the skirt hem, but it's never going to be straight unless it's right at eye level. Refer back to what we learned in video number 1. Because this is below eye level, we're going to be arcing down. So we're following the angle of this skirt, but we're creating the ellipse. Now, if you have any construction elements like gathers or pleats, you have to address the drape change in the hem. So first, let's draw these gathers. When you look at this, you see that some of these lines go all the way through. These gathers create these folds and drapes all the way down to the hem. Some of them just go midway And some of them are just teeny tiny little spots, little gathers, extra gathers along the top. You're going to draw all those things, okay? And so you're going to follow the direction of the swing of the skirt. And some of these are going to go all the way down. Some of these are going to be a third of the way down, half of the way down, okay? And then some of them are just going to be tiny little gathers in here like that. Now you have these gathers and you can see them in the hem, but they're not giant, loopy, ruffly hem changes, okay? They're subtle. So you're gonna see a few little ripples, but nothing dramatic. But you are gonna address that in the hem, like so. So that it is following the angle of the hips, following the ellipse according to where it is on the body, and addressing the gathers from the waist. This is shearing, rows and rows of shearing, and lots of gathers, right? And when you are drawing and designing with shearing, you have to think about what fabric you're using, how many rows, how wide apart those rows, and how much they're going to be gathered. Look at this thing. It's got the double needle rows, and it's very scrunched together. These are single needle rows, but then these are small and these are far more further spaced apart. So you're going to design the space. Remember, everything has to be a deliberate design. One of my favorite things about teaching is when I do these demos, as I'm drawing, I always end up designing the weirdest outfits because they're just the easiest things to draw when you're demoing. Let's create a sheared tube top because, you know, that's what we all wear. Remembering our wraparounds, going over the bust here. And let's say we're going to do this tube top. You know, there's the center front. So these hemlines are perpendicular to your center front. And that's going to be the basic shape of your sheared tube top. Let's say I don't want that many rows. Okay. I want about 4. Okay. I want 4 sections of shearing. And so I'm going to divvy it up evenly. I'm going to design that space however you want to do it. Okay. Or what if you want a center panel? Okay. I'm cutting these at the princess seams and I only want shearing on the sides. Okay. You could do that too. Now notice that you can see this little stitch line. It looks like a zigzag even though it's not, just because of the way the gathers look. But I would draw them like zigzags because that is what they look like. The top and the bottom are going to be clean finish. Let's say I have a little waistband in here to sew that into, and a little top piece to sew that into so that I have a nice clean edge. And then I'm going to poof these out because as they gather, they get poofed out. Okay. And then I'm going to draw the gathers using a lighter pencil or a lighter pencil stroke than the stitching. When you are drawing these stitch lines, always follow your wraparounds to wrap around the contours of the body. So here we are taking shearing and making them looser, not tied up against the body in these tight bands, but using shearing as kind of a drape pulling effect to create, what do you call those? Flounces? I feel like I should know that. I'm gonna look that up. Somebody tell me. Let's say you want to do this skirt, but you want to do this in a much slinkier fabric, okay? Everything would fall and hang heavier, okay? Let's say we're doing this in a silk charmeuse, okay? Where creating the waistband. And this part is fitted. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections of shirring. And it's like a hip yoke, right? And so we have these bands. They're almost the same size as the waistband, right? There's the shirring. This is a light muslin, and so it poofs out, but when you have something heavy and slinky like charmeuse, it'll fall. We're gonna let it fall. It's gonna gather a little bit just because of the gathers from the shirring, but it's gonna fall for the most part. So let's say these things come down from the princess. So we're here and we're here. We've positioned these poles. These are kind of rippling. You want to draw 2 of these because they're channels for pulling the gathers. And these kind of stand up straight because the muslin is so stiff, but now with the charmeuse, it's going to hang. We're going to pull the gathers. You know, anytime I draw gathers, I don't draw the line. I flick the line. Flick, flick, flick. Right? So I'm flicking, drooping, and flicking. Drooping and flicking. That sounds like they should be opposites, but drooping and flicking. There's the hem of that. We're drooping and flicking there. We're going to draw the folds on the sides. So you see how this hangs so much heavier than that. And then I would draw these little zigzags in here. And then I would draw these bows. These are pretty crisp and they stand straight up. Pay attention to your fabric, pay attention to the hang and how it is affected by the construction. Ruffles, okay? And you might be thinking, oh, Zoe, aren't ruffles basically gathers? Yeah, kind of. I mean, you're not wrong. They're ruffles, but the reason I point them out separately is, again, we have to think about how the weight of the fabric really affects the hemline. When you have narrower ruffles, the fabric, you have less fabric weight. And so it will tend to stick out, especially in anything stiffer than a silk charmeuse. You have Duchess satin, you have cotton muslins, anything stiffer, and the less fabric weight there is, the more it's going to stick out. The more it sticks out, the more you see the wavy hemline. Do you see this? How this is that much longer of a ruffle and you see much less of the wave. Another thing you have to think about with ruffles is when you're designing ruffles, you have to think about how much fabric you're gathering into the space. See how different these 3 look from each other just by tweaking the ratio of the gather. Okay, so think about how short your fabric is, how stiff your fabric is, how much things are gathered, and how it's going to affect the overall look of your garment. So let's say you have an off the shoulder. This is wrapping around this arm like so, and then it's coming down like this. It's hanging like this and wrapping over the sleeve. Let's say you have your kind of top binding here. Whenever I draw ruffles, what I do is I just draw the basic shape of the whole block first. So let's say my first ruffle is going to be about yay long, wide. And then my second ruffle is going to be about yay wide. Okay, and this is going to fall flatter. This is going to perk up more. Okay? And I'm going to draw all of these crazy waves. But I'm following the basic shape of this hem that I drew already. And then I'm going to draw the basic cones that are coming from the gathers. And then I have to draw the back side. And then I'm going to draw in all the extra little drapes. And then I'm going to go in here and erase some of this extraneous stuff. And again here, there's the shape. And I'm going to draw those curves, but they're going to be more sedate, calmer, flatter because of the weight of the fabric. I think that went down too far. And then the backs. And then again, some of the other gathers. There are a lot of different pleats out there, like dozens and dozens of different ways to do pleats. There are rules for drawing pleats that apply to a bunch of different pleats. So I'm going to go over those basics. I'm not going to sit there and draw every single kind of pleat. Okay? My goal as a teacher is to give you tools to help you help yourself figure things out. You know, I give you the basics and then send you off to go practice and try things out, okay? We have two different kinds of pleats. You have your unpressed pleats and you have your pressed pleats. The way they're stitched down here, you're going to have a waistband that covers that up, and so that is all you'll see. And you can leave them unpressed, sewn down into the waistband, but unpressed and loose. So you have these soft rolling folds. Or you can have them sewn down and pressed, and so they're very crisp. You're going to express this in several ways. Number one, in drawing the hem. You see the difference between this hem and this hem? The hem of this is very flat. You've got the slight zigzags, okay? You see more zigzag when the pleats pick up. But typically, they're very subtle. Look at these, very subtle difference because everything is folded and pressed flat. Whereas when you have unpressed folds, they look more like drapes. They look like very deep drapes, and you will draw them as such. Another way to address pressed versus unpressed is how you shadow them. I'm not going to go a lot into how to shadow drapes because I'm going to have a whole video devoted to how to shadow all these various construction elements and drapes. But look at these shadows versus these shadows. These are both knife pleats, okay? But because this is all pressed flat, you know, these separating shadows are very small and skinny. Whereas here, they're unpressed. They're deep rolling drapes, and so you're going to see quite big, deep, dark shadows in between each fold. So think about those things when you're drawing, like, are these pressed? Are these unpressed? How crisp are these? You know, how much are they going to unfurl? How much is the fabric affecting the fold? Things like that. Those things are more important than the actual pleat. These are box pleats, these are knife pleats, but the rules are still the same, okay? You draw the verticals spaced out the way you want them spaced. The hem follows the line, and you see subtle changes along the folds. Because the folds are pressed down, your shadows are very small and skinny and not that dark. Here are these teeny tiny little knife pleats. And again, they're spaced out. Shadows are very small. And you see more of the ripple in the overall fabric and drape and not each and every individual fold. I could do this with a million pleats, but you guys get the drift, right? Let's say the rest of this dress is pleated. The last kind of fitted spot is kind of her bust line. It's hanging like so, and there's her hem. Because of her bend and how her hip is picking this up, I'm going to pick up the hem a little bit on this side like that. Let's say I'm going to do pressed pleats in the cotton eyelet that I'm doing the rest of these ruffles in. Okay, so cotton eyelet, it is not as crisp as muslin, but it's not flimsy and floppy like charmeuse. So I always like to start at center front as kind of a guiding point. I'm going to make sure that my pleats are evenly distributed. So I'm here, and they are getting a little bit bigger as I get to the bottom. My pleats are going to be a tiny bit triangular because my dress is A-line. And then they're all going in one direction, but my folds sit like so. Subtle, okay? Not big, deep V's, but subtle little folds. I exaggerate a little bit from real life just to really emphasize that they're folds, but I don't get all crazy, okay? That, if I see something like that, then I'm assuming that the hem is getting cut to create those points. Here, this is just subtle enough so that they just look like pleats on a flat hem. Now remember, you have to pay attention to the drape of the fabric and how it follows the body with the pleats. We have this fold here because of the way her waist is dipped in and twisting. And so I'm kind of swinging out with the fold, right? Like so. And then I'm going to continue the fold direction like that. Crystal pleating is another common kind of pleating. Crystal pleats are the super teeny tiny kind. Let's say she's wearing a halter top. That's the angle of her shoulders. That's the last fitted place. So that's going to be the angle of her hem. We're going to follow this ellipse. I'm going to follow the center front arc. Okay, not as much as her body, but she is swinging this way. And so I'm going to swing all my little crystal pleats, all my teeny tiny pleats. And then I'll emphasize the top a little bit. And then the hem, okay, let's split this in half. If you have a more stiff fabric and you folded up the hem, or you laser cut it before you folded it and you just have teeny tiny little folds, then I would just create those teeny tiny folds and I would get in there and pull up, taper, 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 like so. Typically, you'll see these teeny tiny pleats in like a silk jersey or a crepe, and the hem will be marrowed. It looks like a teeny tiny overlock along the edge, or you create these lettuce hems. And so you'll see these little curly hems, again, following the direction of the ellipse. And then I would, again, pull from the hem. That's probably the more common look. These are accordion pleats. They stick out. Okay, they're pressed, but they're not pressed flat. Okay, they stick out. And so the way you approach these is no different than what I just went over. You follow the basic, you draw your basic garment, you draw the shapes, obeying your fabric. And when you draw the hem, you're going to draw a zigzag for the hem to show that it's accordion pleating. And you're going to put in the shadows and highlights as necessary. Here's mini accordion pleating, where it's so small that you do see the drapes of the fabric, and each drape has all the teeny tiny accordion pleating, but you're not going to see each and every teeny tiny mini pleat in the hem. How would you draw this? It's more of a texture. You would render it as a vertical texture. Okay, because, you know, at this point, it's not long, crisp lines like this. It's a texture. If you watch my how to render denim video, we talked about the twill texture on the surface of denim and how you don't want to draw every single line like a stripe, but hatch in the texture in the direction of your twill. And that's how I would approach something like this. But yeah, you can have all kinds of crazy inverted pleats, but you know, it's the same thing. Figure out your shading, figuring out how the fold works into the hemline. Okay. Draw your pleats in the direction you want them to go. Blah, blah, blah. Space them out evenly. Blah, blah, blah. All right, you know what I'm going to say now, right? Go practice. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag practice, not magic. We are not made of magic. We are made of practice. So go practice, 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 practice. Draw, 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 draw. All the good things. You know, as usual, if you have a question, check the info box. If your answer is not there, scroll through the comments. Somebody might have the same question and I may have answered them before you. You know, I only check comments once a day or so. You know, the glamorous, busy life of a teacher. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and share, like, all those beautiful things that show me that you love me. And go practice, and I will see you next time.